Great recording. What smells like home?
Hmm. My wife's good cooking.
Mm. What does she
Yes,
make on the
I
stove?
am married to a chef, so she's not chef with the title chef, but this woman has been cooking. I tease her sometimes. I say you've been cooking since you came out of the womb. So yes, anytime I walk in and I smell her good cooking, I know I'm at home.
What is her typical dish that she has,
Wow,
or a dish that you love, like nobody can make it like you?
she is creative. I mean, if my wife puts her mind to it,
Hmm.
there's probably not a dish that she can't make. We both are from New Orleans, so we love seafood. So anytime we're frying catfish, potato salad, and things of that nature, we're right at home.
Hmm.
So
Okay, I like that. Good cooking. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space podcast. I am your host, Leah, and today I am glad to have a great conversation in store for you, talking with Fredrick Gillam. Thank you so much for being on the show.
yes, thank you for having me.
Can you please tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, well, it's obvious I am an African American male. I am married to my wife 27 years.
Oh,
My highest,
yay.
yes, yes, I'm excited about that. It's truly, just something I'm very proud of that God has blessed me to
Hmm.
be with her. We've been together a total of 33 years
Oh,
because
wow.
we're high school sweethearts. So
Oh,
started dating after our sophomore year in high school. So dated for 6 years. I've been married for 27. So we have two young adult children. Our son, who is now 26, was born on our 1 year anniversary. And then our daughter came 2 years after him on Christmas. So we got double gifts.
mm,
So yeah, so I'm excited about that, and of course, I'm a man of God. Before everything, I have to acknowledge my relationship with God, because with that relationship, it allows me to function accordingly in the other relationship. So that relationship helps me to be the husband that I need to be to my wife, the father that I need to be to my kids. Helps me to be the therapist. Helps me to be the son, the friend, so forth and so on. So, shouts out to Jesus. And, I'm also a minister, an ordained minister. I serve as an executive pastor, which is like co-pastor
mhm.
in the church that I attend. My wife and I, we work together in ministry. And I'm dually licensed in the counseling arena as a LPC, licensed professional counselor, and LMFT, which is licensed marriage and family therapist. And I'm also in private practice as well. So been full time in the practice since last year during the pandemic. But I've been doing private practice part time since probably 2015.
Mm,
So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
okay. Wow. Well, thank you. What came first, being a minister or being a therapist?
Definitely a minister. So
Okay.
the therapy, the counseling was birthed out of pretty much you could say my call, the calling that was on my life to serve.
Hmm.
And, God revealed to me over a period of time through my ministry that counseling was a strong gift that I had because I was working with families in the ministry. I was doing some premarital counseling and different things. And even prior to me actually answering my call to the ministry, when I reflect and look back, even in my childhood, there was an element that I was a helper,
Mm,
and that I wanted to champion the cause of helping other people that were in distress. I could remember some of my guy friends when they were in distress. I was able to assist them. I had one gentleman He was a best friend. He and I pretty much had grew up together, and he had experienced a bout of suicidal ideation. He actually had a plan in place where he
Mm.
had digested, taken some pills, and he called me, and I was the one. Here it is. I'm a teenager, and I was the one that took him to the hospital. And so I've had other friends that needed a place to stay because there was some conflict, between them and their parents. And my home, my parents graciously allowed me to bring them in as a, place of refuge while they worked through that conflict. So, when I look back, I really, played that supporting role, or what we would call the placator, kind of like that social work role in
Right.
many instances. So not only with friends, but with family as well. And so quite naturally, but I didn't know at the time that it was really a skill set. I was just doing what was innate, what was natural to me to help. And I saw that in my parents. They were helpers. My mom was always doing something for somebody else. My
Mm.
dad was always opening the doors, for other people to come in to the home, And so, we're a product, as they say, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And then as I progressed through ministry, I went to pursue my master's, as God had revealed to me that He wanted me to be able to reach an audience outside the walls of the church.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so, in order to do that, in order for doors to be open in that regard, I had to pursue my master's in counseling and eventually pursue licensure. And just as the Lord laid it out, I'm able to do that now. I've been able to work in agency settings and gain the clinical knowledge. So having the academic background
Hmm.
along with the clinical experience and being led by God's Spirit, to bless people. So having a pure motivation to see individuals overcome whatever the challenges are. Because even in my family of origin, when I look back at the challenges that were present, there was no counseling available.
Right.
And so God raised me up to be an instrument to help individuals to be able to utilize a resource that wasn't available to me or my family when I was coming up.
So let's talk about that part a little bit. Growing up, there was really no talk of like going to a therapist or going to a counselor. You would go to the pastor or to the deacons assigned, have a conversation, and really, really weigh heavy, like rely on their expertise to kind of tell you and guide you on what you need to do in your family. So there wasn't access to that space. But then there's also the stigma of, is something wrong with you? Want to go see
Exactly.
somebody? So how do we start in your space? How did you start having the conversation as you being the first person in your family to be licensed in this space and show them like, no, you're not crazy if you go talk to somebody. You're really showing that, no, I'm saying I just know I need help.
Yes. So in my family, and I guess in many African American families, the church played a huge role, like you just alluded to. And I came up in the Catholic Church because on my
Oh,
mother's side, yeah. So in New Orleans, there's a lot of Black Catholics. So on my mother's side, there was the Catholic influence. So my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunts, uncles, cousins, we all were Catholic in New Orleans. So
wow.
as far as the church influence, when there was a challenge, you went to communion, you went to the confession booth. If you did something
Right.
that you weren't proud of, And you really didn't have, well, I didn't have much interaction with the priest. You know, you might shake the priest's hand on Sundays or whatever after service. And then there's a part of the service where we fellowship and we say, peace be with you, and all of that. But the problems pretty much were resolved within the context of the family. And counseling was not even talked about. It was not on the table.
Right, right.
So when you had challenges at school, it was your parent and the teacher, or it was you, your parent and the principal, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Or and then a way of resolving challenges was spankings, or what we call, punishments. So corporate punishment. But and that was how behavioral challenges were dealt with. And then some things, weren't talked about, that happened within the family. So beside one key factor, besides the fact that ministry, played a significant part in pushing me into the counseling field, my wife and I have a son that was diagnosed with ADHD. But prior to the diagnosis, with the symptoms and the behavior, we didn't know what to do with that, because family of origin, if a child is acting out, then there's the spanking, you take things away, and the challenges were happening, ever since an early age, like daycare, and throughout. So we're like, well, what's going on? So eventually, if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results.
Right,
And
right.
we had to submit to a different process, because each year we were meeting with teachers, we were meeting with counselors, and things weren't changing from year to year. And at that time, I had no knowledge like I have now in counseling and mental health, and the DSM 5 and all of that, the diagnostical statistical manual of mental disorders. Didn't have any knowledge of all of that. So we were resistant early on, to counseling or anything like, oh no, especially medication and diagnosis. But it's almost like you can be pushed into something because it's like you're forced to explore other options when a situation persists over a long period of time. So by the time our son was about in middle school, we said, well, let's submit to a process of counseling, research, and see what happens. And it was one of the best things that we could have done. And it was a turning point for our son and for us as well. And so I like to say that God took me to school right in my own family. And, as he was simultaneously showing me other aspects of the counseling gift, he was educating me by family experience on how counseling can be an effective tool to help families, just like what I was experiencing. And we went through it. So before I was in school or anything like that, we were utilizing the tool. We were able to appreciate what counseling added to our family. It was a value added. And when I look back over that, that was kind of like the formulative stages, whereas God was introducing me to what I would be doing as well to help other families that would face some of the same challenges and even different challenges, because he was sharpening me up, being in tune, compassionate, tolerance, breaking down stigma. So the thing that I once had an aversion to, now I'm open to it. So understanding that plight. And then it also helped me to dig into my family of origin background even more because
Mm.
my grandmother experienced domestic violence in the relationship with my grandfather.
Oh,
So we had
wow.
a history of that in the
Hmm.
family, in which in that marriage eventually ended up in divorce. And that was before my time. So I just heard the stories from my grandmother. So there was trauma there.
Hmm.
Uh, and so here it is, having these different dynamics. And even when my wife and I experienced some challenges in our marriage early on. So a lot of, things to reflect on, uh, and looking at, my parents' marriage and things that they went through and things that I was subject to in my childhood, because those are formative experiences that we draw from, and then we bring them into relationships. And it's not until we are healed from those experiences we're not able to function at our full capacity, and then we're always really growing and evolving. We never get to that place where we've arrived, but we can heal past certain things that have occurred in throughout our lifespan, whether it was in childhood or in adult relationships or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So those things definitely were pivotal and key points to help push me into the place where I am now. So I have so much to draw from because I also served as a senior pastor for 8 years.
Okay.
So I know what it's like to deal with families from that spiritual perspective,
Hmm.
and also helping individuals to when they're faced with needs. So whether it's the essentials, like individuals uh, in need of housing, in need of food, in need of transportation, all of those things, or just in need of somebody to sit with them without judgment, and be able to uh, help them feel good about themselves in the midst of very difficult situations. So all of that, um, shaped and helped me to be well-rounded, uh, as who I am today.
As we start thinking about what counseling has become, what therapy has become, a lot more of us, especially in our communities, are getting access to this service. What are some ways that, as we're, because a lot of us are still new to it,
Yes.
right? And everything isn't for everybody, just like everyone isn't for everybody.
Yes.
So, what are a couple of different ways, as those who are learning to say, hey, I might need some help? What are some ways they can learn to advocate for themselves in this new space?
Wow, that's good. And when you say advocate for themselves, you mean like ways that they can be proactive in seeking help?
Not just in seeking help, but also, so it's the seeking help, and then when you find a person, how do you know that that person's in your corner? How can I identify the group of individuals, or the individuals or the professionals who are there for me and not just there to collect a check?
Oh,
what
wow.
are some what are some things that I should be looking for, or what are some questions that I should ask, maybe, to know that, are you a good one? Are you really here for me? Am I going
Right.
to be able to be helped from this?
Wow, that's good. I try to approach situations from a positive lens,
Mhm.
especially when you think about the helping profession.
Right.
That people don't go into counseling because they just want a paycheck. I mean, because you just don't. It has to be in your heart. Now, can a person lose focus throughout the tenure of their career? Absolutely.
Mm.
But I would like to think that every person that enters this profession is coming from a genuine place, and that they really want to bring about positive change. They want to affect people in a way that they can feel good about it, and the individual can feel good about the therapeutic relationship.
Mm.
So look for the similarities, because we bond over things we have in common. So
Mm.
at one point, African Americans, even Black individuals who had access to mental health resources, were limited in finding people that look like them. And that's
Absolutely.
still a challenge today. And the reason why, because we have to look at the origin, that it didn't start as a multicultural resource.
Mm.
It was of German and European, origin or descent, and therefore, you're talking about generations of an industry being saturated uh, with white influence, and so now here it is on the tail end, that it's being more accepted and made available to Black and brown people or minorities, people of color. It's now we're now trying to play catch up,
Mm.
so that individuals can have someone that could sit across from them, that look like them, and who are familiar with their experiences. And I will say this, that just because someone doesn't look like you doesn't mean they can't help you. Because when my family, uh, we were going through family therapy with our son, the
Mhm.
gentleman that was across from us was white, but I appreciated him to the highest, because he had what we call unconditional positive regard.
Mm.
So his color or his ethnicity, his race didn't matter, in that moment, because he was approaching the therapy with cultural humility, and not from a sense of hierarchy, but more of a lateral approach, and we were able to build a trusting relationship. So it's all about feeling comfortable. So an individual should do their homework and vet the person to make sure that they are credentialed,
Mhm.
so they can look at that. They can view the individual's profile to see what type of services they offer, to make sure that those services align with their needs.
Very
Because you
important.
may have someone that specializes in one area, but you need help in another. And
Mhm.
then you're frustrated because they're not able to meet your need, or you have this expectation, and the expectation is not being met, when you didn't do due diligence to see if that person specialized in that particular area in which you're seeking help. And
Mm.
so it should be listed in that individual's profile, and then you could always ask them. It's like, hey, do you work with individuals, with adolescents with ADHD? Do you work with individuals on the autism spectrum? Do
Mm.
you do family therapy? Are you a Christian? Right? Are you married? So those things are fair game to ask. And if that individual is open, because the relationship is all about being a safe place and being open. Now, of course, the professional doesn't have to disclose everything, of course, about their personal life, but they
Right.
should be able to disclose enough about the person of the therapist, whereas you can make an informed decision: is this the therapist for me and for my family?
That's really good. I never thought about the similarities. Like, as I'm thinking about good therapists that I've come across, it was the similarities that made the sessions way better, because I didn't have to do too much to, like, I can express where I am in the situation, and I don't have to explain the cultural impact, the professional impact, the this, the that. Like, they understood me, and
Exactly.
that made it so much easier. So yeah, that's a good point. So as we're talking about family counseling, family therapy, and making sure that individuals are properly supported in the community, at what point, because I feel like I run into a whole lot of people who are walking around trauma filled,
Okay.
just traumatized left and right, up and down, don't even understand how much their actions or words negatively affect those around them. At what point, if I were to engage into a relationship, do you feel like mental health should be a part of that relationship?
Okay. So you're saying like bring it into the conversation?
Yes.
Yes.
So I have, I was, do people court now? I don't think people court nowadays. It's a situationship that's turned into a relationship, kind of, sort of. Not really titles, but there's titles there because we claim each other in some sense, because that's what relationships are today, I guess.
Yeah.
At what point should we have a conversation? How do we make space for mental health?
Yes. So in a relationship, you're concerned. There should be some empathy there, where uh, you may feel what that individual is going through because you have experienced some of that yourself,
Mm,
or sympathy where you may not have experienced it, but you feel for the plight of where they are, you know, or having compassion. So there has to be some underlying level of care
mm,
there, because if you care, then you owe it to the individual that you're in relationship with to introduce some things. So it's not a matter of forcing or imposing anything on anyone, but maybe making a suggestion, a recommendation, asking a question. Have you considered counseling?
mm.
Have you considered therapy to help you to work through this? And then if you have some level of experience yourself with counseling, then you could be vulnerable and share that with the individual, because that will also help them to feel comfortable, with something that may be foreign to them, because they may say, well,
Right, right.
yes, I have thought about it, but, or no, I didn't think about that. And then you can say, well, if I may, let me share what my experience has been like. Or
Hmm.
if you're able to share someone else's experience, or if you were educated, like, say for instance, you were in some type of training where they talked about counseling,
Right.
and,
Okay.
and you just introduce the concept, because what it does, it gives the person an option. But if you never have the conversation, then that option may not be on the table for them. And so if we care, right, about someone, if we know that they may be going down a dead end street, are we just going to allow them to go down a dead end street without some kind of way throwing up a sign saying, hey,
Right,
now if
right.
you're determined to go that way, I just want to let you know that this is a dead end, right? Because I know for me personally, uh, that's one thing that uh, I really, I guess, hone in on is how can I be a part of the process to help change the trajectory, for someone's life, as other
Right.
people who have helped to change the trajectory for my life. So once we introduce something into the equation,
Hmm.
it's kind of like, letting the toothpaste out of the tube of toothpaste. Once you let it out, you can't put it back in.
Right, right.
So even if the person never takes advantage of it, the fact that you brought it up into the equation, that can't be undone. So the seed has been sown, it has been planted.
Right,
And then it's up to that individual whether or not they take advantage of the resource that's been offered.
So, one, wholeheartedly agree. Options over ultimatums always, because
Yes.
ultimatums don't really benefit anyone in the end, honestly.
Right.
And I do want to get back to that. So let me just write that down. But I forgot how to spell. But I do like that idea of planting the seed. How early should, because we make space for, we start to grow in the relationship, whether it was based on a mutual like, or something, or we happen to run into each other, we enjoy each other's company, whatever the case may be. As the relationship starts to grow, at how early is too early to say, hey, if we're going to do this thing, like, we should probably seek some counseling, just because two dynamic people, different backgrounds, different family dynamics coming together. You have two cultures, whether they're the same color or not, trying to coexist in one space. How early or late should, counseling or therapy be introduced into that relationship?
Wow, that is a great question. Um, I would say as early as possible, because remember, it's a tool.
Hmm.
So before, traditionally, we may have thought about introducing it when it's time to get married. So
Right,
premarital.
that premarital. Uh-huh.
But there is a thing called couples therapy for individuals. They may not plan on getting married, but they want to work through some issues that they're experiencing.
Mm,
So when you recognize that there's some conflict, whether that be destructive communication patterns, you're experiencing frequent communication breakdown, or you want to use the counseling as a platform for preventive maintenance, because you want to gain tools to further strengthen your relationship. So,
okay.
it's not always about resolving conflict. Sometimes it's gaining tools that will allow you to be ahead of the curve,
Right.
right? So that because it is a blend. It is two different individuals. So like you said, you could be of the same race or ethnic background,
Hmm.
but you can have two different experiences. So say for instance, you may have come up in a two-parent home, where you saw a loving couple, and your partner may have come up in a single parent home, and struggled, and
Right,
and
right,
had some issues, daddy issues, as they say, right? And they, those things are affecting the relationship. And
right.
so counseling. So I would say as early as possible, if both parties are willing, and that's the key. When you're doing, say, couple therapy, you might have one person that's motivated and the
Right,
other person is not,
right.
and it takes both to be motivated in order for you to work through it and really get something out of the process.
Having two people that agree on something is a huge thing. That's huge. Just getting two people to make the agreement. Hey, we're either going to, work on therapy, work on ourselves, whatever the case we need, whatever the case may be, so that we can be together or achieve whatever the goal is. What I am hearing a lot of, especially in the dating space, is that there are so many people who realize now that, we're in our 30s and 40s, I've never really had a real relationship. I don't even know what that is supposed to look like.
Okay.
So, how can a therapist help to navigate that space in understanding what boundaries are, what communication should look like? Not saying that there is a standard, but understanding with your personality, your wants and needs, this is how to effectively work together in a not a group setting, but as a couple to effectively reach the goal of coming together at the end of the day, being
Yeah,
together throughout the day, you know?
I'm glad you said that because that's what I was going to say. Goal setting. So in the midst of counseling, there's always an element of what we call psychoeducation or
Hmm.
education. So being able to construct a framework for the couple to define what healthy means,
Mm,
because sometimes individuals don't know what healthy means because um, all they've been in is maybe dysfunction, or that's what they observed in others that they're close to. So they're trying to navigate away from that and create new patterns, healthy
mm,
patterns. So it takes for people to establish, the building blocks, the fundamentals of relationship, communication, intimacy, and all of that is tied to an individual's value system. So it's not
mm,
necessarily tied to the therapist's value system because the therapist is not the one in the relationship. But the therapist's job is to come in as that neutral third party
hmm.
to help the individuals to get to their destination. And so being able to define what it is that you want to accomplish. So they might say, well, we're having problems communicating, or we're not on the same page spiritually, right? Or we're having problems assimilating into each other's families,
Mm.
right? So all of those things. So it's kind of like you triage, just like if you were to go to the emergency room.
Right,
They're
right.
going to triage. They're going to say, okay, what is most pertinent? What do we need to address first? And then we kind of go from there. So the goal setting is identifying 1, 2, 3 goals so that you can measure progress. And I, as a therapist, believe in giving the clients that I see homework, so that from session to session, they're able to implement, put it into practice, and then come back and we talk about it. So, once you establish where you're trying to go, then the therapist comes alongside to help you to get there.
Right. Okay. One question I did have that I just know some naysayers might ask: how do you sustain the boundary between support from your therapist or your counseling professionals and validation? Some people are so starved for validation
Hmm.
in certain spaces that when it comes to their relationship, they may be insecure about it. So, how can we make sure that we're not abusing the tools by seeking that validation in the relationship or from the counselor or therapist in the relationship?
And that's a part of our training as therapists, because the relationship, the therapeutic bond, or the rapport building is not a friendship. So it
Mm,
is a counseling relationship.
okay.
So it's not a relationship where the therapist is trying to get their needs met in the relationship. And it's not a relationship really where the client is trying to get their needs met by establishing this relationship. What I mean is, um, it doesn't take the place of other relationships that an individual should be having outside of counseling. So, like a
Mm,
friendship or a relationship with a family member or whatever the case may be. The therapeutic relationship is all about helping an individual to achieve certain goals with a trusted professional that
right.
has been trained to help them to get there. And so it is also our job to recognize when unhealthy patterns present themselves
Mm,
in the therapeutic venue, and to be able to address it. Because our main objective, number one, is to do no harm. So we're not trying to bring something out in a way where we're trying to be damaging to an individual.
Right.
But at the same time, if certain things are not addressed and brought out, that can be damaging. So we have to recognize, the seat that we sit in. It's not about us receiving the validation or the approval, so to speak, of the client, but our role is to help that individual to be as healthy as they possibly can. And sometimes that does mean acknowledging certain patterns of behavior that is juxtaposed or counterproductive to what they're trying to accomplish. And most people, it, can appreciate that. They want the therapist to give that type of feedback and basically really to do their job, right? And so when an individual, may not be open to that, it's not the therapist's job to try to console and make them be open to it, right? Because it's not about I want you to like me, it's not about that. It's I want to do what you're paying me to do, which
Right.
is help you to be the best you that you can be. I hope
I
that
like
answers
it.
the
I
question.
like it. So this has been throughout recording with the mental health in the mental health series. One thing that really has stuck out a lot to me is our village is making more space for therapists to come help us unpack some of the things that we've gone through, which is amazing. I'm glad that we're kind of reconstructing our villages to make sure that we are as healthy as we can be physically, mentally, spiritually, all of that.
Hmm.
Um, my question is more about the elders in the community. What kind of space can we create in a family dynamic to ensure that there is still room for their voices to be heard and hold weight? And maybe that's not the best way to ask that question, but if I think of a better way, I'll ask it. But that's kind of the question that I'm asking, is the space that has been that is shrinking fast because a lot of our elders are not as visible. And it could be social media, it could be because we're getting our information from TikTok trends and waiting for fads and trends and all that kind of stuff to come through for us to be like, oh, well, maybe this and this history and things like that. And a lot of people now are self-diagnosing with, oh no, I think I'm on this spectrum, or I have this, or I'm doing this. um, but yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on how we can make sure that we are not losing the wisdom of our elders as
No,
we begin to reshape our village. I think that's what I want to say.
yes, and I could appreciate that because for me, it's a wraparound approach because there is no resource that is the end all and be all, right? So, like you and I were talking earlier, Jesus plus therapy. So,
Yes.
God is the end all, the be all. He is the we are agents of change, but he is the change agent.
Hmm.
And so when we lose sight and we begin to extract pertinent pieces from the equation, we're still going to come up short. We're still going to be shortchanged because it took the wisdom of those individuals to get us to the place where we are today. So to devalue it, we would be doing ourselves a disservice. One thing that I try to do as often as I can is to honor my grandmother in my work. So when I do a presentation, I may say something that my grandmother said, when I'm doing that presentation, because I want to honor that I wouldn't be occupying the space that I'm occupying without the influence that she had on my life. And she would say things like, and she called me Fredo. My grandmother, she was Creole, and she was from Lafayette, Louisiana, and she had this deep accent that sounded like she was from the islands, like she was Caribbean. And she would say things like, "It's so nice to be nice," and she would say things like, "If you're ugly on the inside, you'll be ugly on the outside," you know. And she had such a profound influence on my life because her spirituality. She was often found reading the Bible and praying, and she instilled that in me, and of course in my mother, and so forth. So we also have to recognize that if we begin to discount those individuals, what happens to us when we reach that age? So if we don't hold them in high regard and we don't esteem them, then in turn, who will esteem us? Who will hold us in high regard? So even in my own family, I model that, like my wife's father. We call him now father in love. So we take the law out. Instead of saying father in law, we say father in love. He's been dealing with cancer over the last almost 4 years now, diagnosed at stage 4. Oh, wow. And so my wife and I, we work together as a team, and you wouldn't know the difference as to whether or not I was a bio son or not, because like I do things like my wife, I say, "Hey, I got it. You take care of this and that. I'll go over. I'll cook dinner. I'll clean up. I'll do whatever that I need to do." And I model that, and I tell my son and my daughter, and they say, "Oh, what you up to?" They might call, and I say, "Well, I'm over on my way to your grandfather's house to bring him dinner or do so and so," so that we can be an example. We can model that for them, so that hopefully in turn, that as we age and enter that bracket, that they can remember what they saw us do, and also what we instilled in them as far as honoring their elders. So we definitely can't afford to, be void of the wisdom that they have to pass on to us, because we wouldn't be who we are without it.
That's very true. And sometimes when I think about where we are and the just lack of wisdom, and you can just see it in the way that some of us move. And I don't know if it's prevalent because now we have social media and everybody's airing their dirty laundry, or if it's really that many more people who are without those elders who have that respect in the community to pull your coattail, or who will be able to help guide you or ask you the questions that you need to be asked, or tell you, hey, maybe you might need to see somebody, or there may be services that can help you, or you need a different support system, or even warning you about the people who you think are your friends. It's those kind of things that seem so small, but as we're just reshaping the village, I hope that we're not leaving that wisdom, that love, that compassion, all those things that come with being an elder behind.
And if I could say this too,
absolutely,
those of us that hold that role of elder, then we have to model it. We have to embody it, because it's not just an age thing, but
very true.
It is the way we conduct ourselves. So kind of like what I was saying for my son and my daughter, and what my wife and I, what they see us do. Well, we saw that in our parents and how they took care of their parents. So the baton is successively supposed to pass down from generation to generation. Now, we can't help it if a generation drops the baton,
Right.
but it's our responsibility to pass it to them. Now, what they do with it at that point, that's up to them, But our charge is to be in position with the baton to pass it to them.
Right.
So, yeah.
I I agree, because some people want to hold that title, but it's more important to me to have the relationship.
Hmm.
You can't you can't expect someone to show up for you if you just have a title, because you could be grandma, auntie, mom, dad, whomever, but if there's no relationship that backs up that title, it can make it very difficult to want to do things that honors that title just because you hold the title.
Yes.
It's yeah, it's I've had
It's
that.
challenging.
Yes,
It, it,
it can
it's,
be.
it's challenging. Yeah,
It can be
definitely.
very, very challenging. But I'm glad to hear that there are people who are like yourself, willing to show the next generation, this is how you take care of your village, this is how you take care of your family. As as we start to get toward the end, I just wanted to ask you this question. As the community, and not saying that you have to speak for the entire Black community, it's just your community that you service, as the community is starting to heal and get access to different resources, whether it's education, mental health, financial literacy, homes, things of that nature, what are some encouragements that you can extend to the community, so that they know, like, hey, it's not going to change all at one time, but the just to let them know, like, it's working, it's starting to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more, just like what you're doing, Leah, I appreciate you having this platform, this podcast to talk about it. Because the more that we talk about things, the word gets out, it spreads through word of mouth, and especially through tools like what you're using, the podcast. Um, we should continue to incorporate and embed these discussions in the places that we frequent. So, like I was looking at, I'm a part of this therapist group on the internet, and what we do is kind of share resources. And one person posted about a barber shop that was doing a mental health day, where they were going to have a therapist, yes, go to the barber shop and be able to talk, on certain topics. And traditionally, the barbershop has always been a good place to have good dialogue. Because I know when I was a young man coming up and I'd go to the barbershop, there'd be a lot of conversation that we'd be exposed to, some healthy, some unhealthy. So, but it was a part of the culture, it was a part of the tradition to go to the barbershop, whether you were going with your dad, your uncle, your friend, or whatever. But it was something that you look forward to do, and it was kind of like a bonding experience. So being able to use venues like that where people are connecting to embed mental health, to have those discussions. Another gentleman, that's a colleague of mine, he's offering a group for men. And I think he's calling it the sixth day or something like that. So it's a brand new men's group where he's incorporating a Christ-centered group for men. I myself am offering a grief support group. And as a matter of fact, it'll take place on tomorrow, which is the 11th of November, from 7 to 8:30 in the city of Memphis. And it's specifically for individuals who have lost loved ones. So typically in our community, group therapy is not accessed, in abundance by African Americans. So that's new. So anytime we introduce something new, we just need to be consistent, because it may not take off right away, but it will take off. And we just have to be consistent because we know it's a need in the community. We know, especially around the holidays, individuals are their grief sometimes is exacerbated because there's that person that's missing at the table. Uh, so the more that we have conversation and say, hey, have you considered uh, joining a grief support group to help you to work through those issues, opposed to, I just have to power through it. I have to be strong, and not realizing that when we're dealing with grief, it's not about being strong or weak. It's about being human, and it's about experiencing loss. And the more that we can have these conversations and normalize it, especially like in a church setting, and recognize that God says it's okay to go through the grieving process. It doesn't mean that you're embracing sadness, but it is a part of grief. And God will give us tools. He'll give us resources to work through it. And when we can begin to normalize it and say, hey, it's okay, because what you're dealing with is difficult, and God knows that it's difficult, and he's yet a healer. But he, just like he gave you a primary care physician, your PCP, and he gave you the specialist, your endocrinologist, and all of these other doctors. He's also given psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists that can help, because we're not just spiritual, but we are also psychological, and we're also physiological. And it takes everything. We have to address every part of us. So we can't just compartmentalize and say, well, I'm only going to attend to my spiritual health, but I'm not going to attend to my mental health or my physical health, right? But we have to address these things all together. So I hope I answered the question on that.
Yes, you did. One, let me just say thank you, because, first of all, for those who don't know, it has been extremely hard getting a black male therapist who has a reputable, you know, who, first of all, who's reputable. Second of all, who's willing to come on the show. It's been difficult. And I
Wow.
was able to get you through another connection in Dr. Mikel. Shout out to Dr. Mikel. If you haven't
Yes.
listened to
Shout
that
out to
episode, go
Dr.
listen to it.
Mikel.
Yes, go listen to
She
that
is a
episode.
great colleague and friend who I respect to the highest.
Yes. It has, in these spaces, it's harder to find black men who can talk, not just talk it, but walk the walk, so that it's accessible to other black men. Secondly, awesome, something that people probably don't even think about much is that bi-directional belonging. If you show up in spaces where people are, like the barbershop, like church, like schools, then it becomes less taboo and more of, oh, I did see that service. I do know about this. There is some recognition there. And because belonging is not just one way. There's two parties at least in there that has to say, yes, I want to come a little bit this way. And yes, I'm going to come a little bit this way, so that the two parties can belong. And I feel like there's a part of our community that otherizes those who seek out counsel.
Yes.
And if we can start learning how to normalize, even is not just because you want to, oh no, don't go to the council, you're going to tell all my business. No, I'm going so I can stop carrying around grudges. I'm going so I can stop lying. I'm going so that I can start thinking clearly. I'm going because I don't know why I can't focus, but I've been having this dark cloud over me for so long. I need to
Yes.
talk to somebody about it. Maybe they can help me see past it. And because obviously y'all not helping. I've been talking to y'all about it for 10 years, you know? So I do like that idea and plan of action to consistently show up in spaces where we are, because out of sight, out of mind.
Yes,
That's what
and
it is.
I'm seeing more of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was just having a talk with another prominent pastor in the city of Memphis, and as we were talking about some ideas, he had already been talking with another colleague of mine in a group of therapists, and they put on a mental health conference. So yeah, so it is so
Yes.
good to see that it's been, and I've done a lot with churches as well, as far as like grief support groups and just education on mental health. So definitely we are breaking down the walls, and like I said, we need that continuity. We need to continue to do it. Another thing I wanted to address that you brought up is that the confidential piece, because like you say, oh, somebody say, oh, you telling my business. Well, one thing for sure is that therapists are bound by HIPAA laws, which means that we're bound to keep information confidential.
Mm.
So that's one, key aspect that helps individuals to feel comfortable about sharing, is that there are limits to the confidentiality. So everything that an individual will share will be confidential, with the exception if they're having suicidal thoughts with a plan in place to harm themselves. Because an individual might have suicidal thoughts, but if they don't have a plan, that's different. But if they have a plan in place, then you can't keep that confidential. Same thing with homicidal thoughts. With a plan in place, then that's a limit to confidentiality, because we're bound by the law to have a duty to warn and to keep other people safe as well. Also, any indication of child abuse or elder abuse. So those are the things that are limits to confidentiality, because we're mandated reporters. But other than that, and all of that is about safety, about keeping people safe. But other than that, people are able to come in and to talk about some things that are really in depth without having the fear of being exposed or being put out there, as we used to say on Front Street.
Yeah.
It is contained within the confines of that therapeutic relationship, and without judgment. So, and individuals can also know that we can work with people of all different backgrounds. I myself, I don't just see Black clients. I see white clients. I see Hispanic clients, but that's also the personableness of the therapist, and the work and the exposure. So work goes into that, in being culturally relevant, and having what we call cultural immersion experiences, where we can relate, to other people. So, but it definitely is a tool that is very helpful. It's vital in our communities, and it can be used in so many different facets, to help individuals to attain more of a qualitative experience in their life. Which, I just want to say this, put that plug out there. My private practice is Aesthetic Life Counseling Services. So that's AESTHETIC, Aesthetic Life Counseling Services, here in the city of Memphis. If anybody needs to contact me, I'm also on Psychology Today. They can look me up on Psychology Today. And my business line is 901-620-9120.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Right before we get out of here, there's one question I completely forgot to ask before. But one of the listeners wanted a counselor to really, or a therapist to really speak on this part because they were a little bit concerned. It was, how do I know if I go to my counselor, because this person only has like we only have ourselves to gauge. You all see everybody else, so your gauges are a little bit bigger than ours.
Okay.
But the question was, how do I know that when I go to a counselor and tell them, like, divulge all of my information, this is what's going on, and just verbally vomit everything, that my kids won't get taken away?
So the counselor, it's not the job of the counselor to take your kids away. That's not the purpose of therapy. Remember, every individual should remember the goal of therapy is to do no harm and to help individuals to work through whatever the challenges are, to enhance quality of life. Um, if information is divulged that indicates there is some type of physical abuse, neglect, um, or it could be emotional abuse,
Mm.
abuse of any sort. It's not the counselor's job to investigate, but to report to the Child Protective Services or Department of Human Services, DHS, CPS, and then they investigate, because ultimately we want to keep individuals safe. So children, which are a vulnerable population,
Mhm.
if there is no one to advocate for them, then they could be subject to environments that is causing them harm. So the purpose of the entities is to protect the children. And once an investigation is done, then a determination is made as to whether or not the child is in harm's way, or you know, because sometimes they're finding, which I don't work for CPS or DHS. And like I said, therapists, we don't do investigations unless you work for those departments. We only report if there is an indication. Uh,
Mm.
so, but the person that works for those entities may go in and they may say, well, this family needs this. They might say they need anger management.
Mm.
They might say, well, this person is causing challenges for someone else that's putting them in harm's way. This person needs to be removed from the home, or this person needs to um, be temporarily placed in another home until things are worked out. You know, so it can be different tools that
Okay.
whoever it is that goes in and assess that family. So it may not result in a child being removed. It may result in more services that are needed being employed to that individual and that family.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, the person who answered it. But thank you so much for this conversation. It has been enlightening, it has been helpful. I truly appreciate the plans that you have in place. The Just knowing that y'all are out there, Black men especially, are out there trying to empower each other and be there for one another and create safe spaces for others to come and to share and to build that camaraderie. And, as we continue to reshape this village, it just makes my heart happy. I'm just so happy to hear it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Um,
you, Leah. This has
yeah.
truly been a privilege and an honor for me, just to be invited. I don't take it for granted. For me, it's just like Oprah opened the door for me to come, um, because you extended an opportunity for us to get the word out. You
Yes.
know, and I really appreciate that. And hopefully, you'll invite me back at some point. We could talk further.
Absolutely. This is your time. If you have anything else that you would like to plug, any books or services or events that you have going on. I know a lot of therapists are doing courses and different seminars. So if you have anything that you would like to plug, any resources that you would like to give out, just this is your time. Go ahead. You got the floor.
Yeah. So again, just to let individuals know that I am in private practice, aesthetic life counseling services. You can find me on Psychology Today. It'll list my profile. I also do take insurance for those who are looking to utilize insurance. I'm paneled with Cigna, and then another insurance company called ComPsych. Uh, and then also the self-pay rates are on the Psychology Today as well. And then starting this grief support group. So the grief support group is for individuals who have lost loved ones, because grief could be so expansive and it could cover so much. It's for individuals that have lost loved ones. And then also, if someone has Cigna insurance, they could use it for the group. There's a small fee for each session. It's just $40 per session. And it's a unique opportunity to receive support before the Thanksgiving holiday, before Christmas comes. And then this will be a continuous group. So it's not going to stop, when we have those sessions that'll kind of close out before Christmas. We'll pick it back up after Christmas as well. So when you come to the group, it's a safe environment to connect with others who have experienced like loss. So they also have experienced the loss of loved ones as well. You don't have to talk when you come to the group. If you want to, kind of sit and listen, you can do that. Because sometimes people find excuses not to use the support that could be so vital and so relevant for them in this season. But one thing for sure is that the tool can't help you if you don't take advantage of it. And so God has gifted individuals within this arena specifically for the purpose of being additional support to help, as we all need help as we go through. And I mentioned how my family utilized help. So I would say to any individual, if you have lost a loved one, do yourself a favor and engage in this group. It'll be helpful, and you'll be able to connect with others who have shared experiences. So, and I would be more than honored to help you in that capacity if you or your family decides to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fredrick. I appreciate you being on the show. Y'all make sure that y'all go check out Psychology Today, send him an email, or even give him a call, and he will help you out with resources or any other help that you may need. If he's not the therapist for you, maybe there are other therapists who are out there. Of course, there are other therapists out there that he'll be able to point you to so that you can get the help and support that you need, even if you're just curious. Ask a question. It couldn't
Ask the
hurt.
question.
Yes,
I helped
always ask a
somebody
question.
today. I helped somebody today, that I couldn't benefit them, but I was able to point them to some other therapists that maybe could meet their needs. So
Yes,
definitely.
that is what we're talking about. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space Podcast. I've been your host, Leah. Make sure to follow us at Take a Space Pod. That's Take a Space POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you so much for being on the show, Fredrick. I appreciate you. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Have a great